In just 47 seconds, one of Britain's most respected actors would deliver a devastating verbal assault that left Lorraine Kelly visibly shaken, her carefully constructed morning television persona crumbling before millions of viewers. What began as promotional chat about Ashley Walters' latest Netflix series spiraled into a brutal takedown that exposed the host's most controversial tactics, culminating in the actor's explosive exit that has sent shockwaves through the entertainment industry. The tension was palpable from the moment Ashley Walters stepped onto the Lorraine Kelly show set last night. The top boy star, known for his measured demeanor and professionalism, appeared unusually guarded as he settled into the guest chair opposite Kelly, who was flashing her trademark smile with perhaps a bit more intensity than usual. "Ashley, lovely to see you again," Kelly began, her voice carrying that sing-song quality that has become her signature. "Now, before we talk about your brilliant new project, I have to ask about something that's been making headlines." Walter's expression immediately shifted, his jaw tightening slightly as he leaned back in his chair. "What would that be, Lorraine?" The host's smile never wavered, but there was something predatory in her eyes as she shuffled through her notes with theatrical precision. "Well, there's been quite a bit of chatter about some of your recent comments regarding representation in British television. Some people are saying you've been quite critical of certain programs and their casting choices. I've been honest about the industry's shortcomings." "Yes," Walters replied, his voice steady but with an edge that keen viewers would have noticed immediately. "Is that what you want to discuss instead of the work I'm here to promote?" Kelly's laugh was high-pitched and forced. "Oh, come now, Ashley. You know how these things work. People are talking about it, so naturally we have to address it. You did say that some British productions are embarrassingly white and lack authentic representation. Those are strong words." The actor's posture straightened, and for the first time since sitting down, he looked directly into the camera rather than at his host. "They're truthful words, Lorraine, and I stand by them completely. But don't you think," Kelly continued, her tone becoming more pointed, "that comments like that might be seen as divisive? After all, many of these productions provide jobs for hundreds of people. Are you really suggesting that white actors shouldn't be cast in certain roles?" The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon, and Walter's response was measured but increasingly firm. "That's not what I said, and I think you know that. What I'm talking about is authentic representation, and giving opportunities to actors from backgrounds that have been systematically excluded from this industry for decades." Kelly's mask was beginning to slip, her smile becoming more strained. "But, Ashley, surely you can understand how some viewers might interpret your comments as, well, anti-white. We've had quite a few emails and social media messages from people who feel that way." The studio audience, which had been relatively quiet up to this point, began to murmur. Some viewers could be heard shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Walters looked around the studio, then back at Kelly, with an expression that had grown considerably colder. "Anti-white?" he repeated, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Lorraine, are you seriously suggesting that advocating for diversity and inclusion is somehow racist against white people?" "I'm not suggesting anything," Kelly replied quickly, though her defensive tone suggested otherwise. "I'm simply asking the questions that our viewers want answered. We have to represent all perspectives here." "No, what you're doing," Walter said, his voice rising slightly, "is trying to create controversy where there shouldn't be any. You're taking legitimate concerns about representation and trying to twist them into something divisive for the sake of ratings." The host's laugh was even more forced this time, and she began fidgeting with her notes more aggressively. "That's quite an accusation, Ashley. I'm simply doing my job as a journalist." "Journalist?" Walter's eyebrows shot up, and there was genuine disbelief in his voice. "Lorraine, with all due respect, when was the last time you did any actual journalism? This morning television format you've perfected is about as far from journalism as reality TV is from documentary filmmaking." The comment landed like a physical blow. Kelly's composure wavered visibly, her smile faltering for just a moment before she attempted to recover. "Well, I think our viewers would disagree with that assessment. Your viewers deserve better than manufactured controversy and gotcha questions designed to create viral moments." Walter shot back, his professional veneer beginning to crack. "They deserve honest conversations about real issues, not this tabloid garbage you're trying to pass off as television journalism. The tension in the studio was now impossible to ignore. Camera operators were adjusting their positions, clearly sensing that something significant was unfolding. Kelly's production team could be seen in the background, some speaking urgently into their headsets. "I think you're being quite unfair, Ashley," Kelly said, her voice taking on a wounded tone that many viewers had seen her use before when confronted. "We've always had a good relationship, and I've always been supportive of your work." "Have you, though?" Walters challenged, leaning forward in his chair. "Because right now, it feels like you've invited me here under false pretenses. You said this was about promoting the new series, but it's clear you had a completely different agenda from the moment I sat down." Kelly's attempt at damage control was becoming increasingly desperate. "I assure you that wasn't my intention, but surely you can understand that when a public figure makes controversial statements, we have to explore them. It's part of our responsibility to our audience." "Controversial?" Walter's voice was rising now, and there was genuine anger creeping in. "Saying that black and brown actors deserve equal opportunities is controversial? Pointing out that British television has a representation problem is controversial? What exactly is controversial about wanting to see faces that look like mine and my children's on screen in roles that aren't just criminals or victims?" The question cut through the studio like a knife, and for a moment, Kelly seemed genuinely speechless. The silence stretched uncomfortably, as she scrambled for a response that wouldn't further inflame the situation. But the damage was already done, and both host and guest knew it. The careful balance of morning television diplomacy was crumbling, and what happened next would determine whether this confrontation would be remembered as a minor television spat or something far more significant. Kelly recovered first, but her attempt at regaining control only made things worse. "Ashley, I think you're being a bit dramatic here. We're just having a conversation about your opinions." "My opinions?" Walter's voice cracked with incredulity. "These aren't opinions, Lorraine. These are facts backed by statistics, research, and decades of documented exclusion. But you want to frame them as opinions, because that makes them easier to dismiss." The host's facade was deteriorating rapidly. Her signature warmth had been replaced by something colder, more calculated. "Well, I think many of our viewers would say that things have improved considerably over the years. We have shows like Bridgerton. Doctor Who has had diverse casting." "Oh, for fuck's sake," Walters interrupted, and the profanity sent a visible shock through the studio. Several audience members gasped audibly. "You're going to sit there and cherry-pick two examples as proof that systemic racism in British television has been solved? That's exactly the kind of superficial thinking that keeps these problems alive." Kelly's eyes flashed with something approaching genuine anger now. "There's no need for that language, Ashley. This is a family show." "Family show?" Walters laughed bitterly. "You invite me here to ambush me with loaded questions about race. You misrepresent my statements, and you're worried about my language? Where was this concern for families when you were trying to paint me as some kind of racist against white people?" The confrontation had now reached a point where both participants were operating on pure adrenaline. The pretense of a friendly chat had been completely abandoned, and what remained was raw, unfiltered tension that had the entire studio on edge. "I never said you were racist," Kelly protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "I was simply exploring different perspectives on a complex issue." Walters leaned forward, his eyes boring into hers with laser-like intensity. "No, Lorraine. What you did was take my legitimate criticism of an industry that has historically excluded people who look like me, and you tried to flip it into an attack on white people. That's not journalism, that's manipulation." The studio had fallen completely silent now, save for the low hum of cameras and equipment. Even the production crew seemed frozen, unsure whether to intervene or let the confrontation play out to its natural conclusion. Kelly made one final attempt to wrestle back control of the narrative. "I think you're mischaracterizing what happened here. Our viewers are intelligent enough to make up their own minds about what they've heard." "Are they, though?" Walters shot back, his voice rising to a near shout. "Because you've spent the last 10 minutes trying to tell them what to think about my comments, instead of actually discussing the real issues. You've turned a conversation about representation into a circus, and you've done it deliberately." The accusation hung in the air like a challenge, and Kelly's response revealed just how deep this confrontation had cut. "How dare you question my integrity as a broadcaster? I've been doing this for decades. And I don't need lectures from someone who thinks the entire industry is against him. The words were barely out of her mouth before Walters was on his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the studio floor. The sudden movement caused several cameras to quickly adjust their angles, and a collective intake of breath could be heard from the audience. "The entire industry isn't against me, Lorraine," he said, his voice now deadly calm in a way that was somehow more menacing than his earlier anger. "But people like you, who use their platforms to perpetuate the exact problems I'm talking about, certainly are." Kelly remained seated, but her body language had shifted entirely. Gone was any pretense of warmth or professionalism, replaced by something defensive and increasingly desperate. "People like me? What exactly is that supposed to mean?" "It means people who have gotten so comfortable in their privileged positions that they can't recognize their own role in maintaining the status quo," Walters replied, his words carefully chosen and delivered with surgical precision. "You sit in that chair every morning, smiling and nodding, pretending to care about important issues, but the moment someone challenges the system that's made you wealthy and famous, you attack them." The studio was electric with tension now. Every person present understood they were witnessing something extraordinary. A moment when the polite facade of television had been stripped away to reveal something much more raw and real underneath. Kelly's voice was shaking slightly when she responded, whether from anger or shock was impossible to tell. "I have never attacked you, Ashley. I asked legitimate questions that many people are thinking." "Legitimate questions?" Walter's laugh was harsh and bitter. "You asked me if advocating for diversity was anti-white. You suggested that calling out racism was divisive. Those aren't legitimate questions. They're talking points designed to discredit anyone who challenges the way things are." The exchange had reached a crescendo that felt unsustainable. Both participants were operating beyond the normal boundaries of television discourse, and the consequences of what was happening were becoming clearer with each passing second. "I think we should move on to discussing your new project," Kelly said weakly, making one last desperate attempt to salvage the interview. But Walters was having none of it. "Move on? After what just happened? You really think we can just pretend that you didn't just spend 15 minutes trying to paint me as some kind of radical for wanting to see more black faces on British television?" The question revealed the full scope of what had transpired, and there was no going back now. Kelly's face had gone pale, but there was still fight left in her. "I was doing my job, Ashley. I was asking the questions that needed to be asked. If you can't handle that level of scrutiny, maybe you shouldn't be making such bold statements in the press." The words hit Walters like a slap, and his response was immediate and devastating. "Scrutiny? Is that what you call it? Let me tell you what real scrutiny looks like, Lorraine. Real scrutiny would involve you examining why British television is still so overwhelmingly white 40 years after shows like Roots aired. Real scrutiny would mean asking why black actors are still predominantly cast as criminals, victims, or comic relief. Real scrutiny would be questioning why production companies claim they can't find talented black actors when we're standing right here, ready to work. The studio audience was completely captivated now, some leaning forward in their seats as if watching a car crash unfold in slow motion. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of what was rapidly becoming one of the most explosive confrontations in daytime television history. "But instead," Walters continued, his voice building to a crescendo, "you invite me here and spend your time trying to make me the problem. You take my legitimate concerns and twist them into something controversial because that's easier than actually addressing the real issues. You'd rather make me the villain than examine your own complicity in a system that continues to marginalize people like me." Kelly shot to her feet now, her professional composure completely abandoned. "My complicity? How dare you? I've given platforms to hundreds of diverse guests over the years. I've supported countless causes and charities. You have no right to question my commitment to equality. Supporting charities and having diverse guests for photo opportunities isn't the same as using your influence to create real change." Walters fired back, his own voice rising to match hers. "You want credit for doing the bare minimum while maintaining a system that benefits you at the expense of others." The confrontation had reached a fever pitch that was almost unbearable to watch. Both participants were now standing, facing each other across the small coffee table that separated them, their voices echoing through the studio with an intensity that made everyone present acutely uncomfortable. I have spent decades building this career, Kelly said, her voice cracking with emotion. And I won't have it torn down by someone who thinks every white person in television is automatically racist. There it is, Walter said, his voice suddenly dropping to an ominous whisper that was somehow more powerful than his earlier shouting. You finally said it. This isn't about journalism or asking tough questions. This is about you feeling attacked personally, because I dared to criticize an industry that's been very good to you. The accuracy of the observation was written across Kelly's face, and her next words confirmed what everyone in the studio already knew. Maybe it is personal. Maybe I'm tired of being told that everything I've achieved is somehow illegitimate because I'm white. The admission sent a ripple of shock through the studio. Several audience members could be heard gasping, and the production team looked frozen with horror at what their host had just revealed on live television. Walter stared at her for a long moment, his expression shifting from anger to something approaching pity. Nobody said your achievements were illegitimate, Lorraine. But the fact that you heard criticism of systemic racism and made it about your personal success tells us everything we need to know about why these problems persist. Kelly seemed to realize what she had just said, and the color drained from her face entirely. I didn't mean. That's not what I. Yes, it is, Walters interrupted, his voice now calm but filled with finality. That's exactly what you meant, and that's exactly the problem. You're so invested in protecting your position that you can't see past your own privilege to recognize the struggles of others. The studio had become a pressure cooker of tension and embarrassment. Kelly looked around desperately, perhaps hoping for rescue from her production team, but found only shocked faces staring back at her. This is exactly why nothing changes, Walters continued, his voice gaining strength as he delivered what would become his final statement of the interview. Because people like you, who have the power to make a difference, are more concerned with protecting yourselves than addressing real problems. You'd rather attack the messenger than hear the message. He began removing his microphone, his movements deliberate and final. I came here to talk about my work, to discuss projects I'm passionate about, to maybe inspire some young black kid watching at home to believe they could have a career in this industry too. Instead, you turned it into an interrogation designed to discredit me and my message. Kelly made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Ashley, please, let's just sit down and finish this conversation properly. We can discuss your new series, talk about your upcoming projects. But Walters was already walking away, his microphone pack left abandoned on the chair behind him. I'm done, Lorraine. I'm done pretending that this kind of television serves anyone except the people who benefit from keeping things exactly as they are. He paused at the edge of the interview area and turned back to face her one final time. You want to know what's really controversial? The fact that in 2024, we're still having to explain why representation matters. The fact that asking for equality is still seen as asking for too much. The fact that people like you would rather destroy the messenger than listen to the message. With that, Ashley Walters walked off the set, leaving behind a stunned studio, a devastated host, and millions of viewers who had just witnessed one of the most explosive confrontations in daytime television history. Kelly stood alone among the cameras and lights, the weight of what had just transpired written clearly across her face. The interview was over, but the impact of what had just unfolded would reverberate through the industry for months to come. In 47 seconds of devastating honesty, Ashley Walters had not only defended his position, but had exposed the very attitudes and behaviors that make real progress so difficult to achieve. The carefully constructed world of morning television pleasantries had been shattered, leaving behind uncomfortable truths that could no longer be ignored.